Welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. It's February. It's time for the February installment of our 2025 calendar unblanket project. And since it's February and Valentine's Day lands halfway through the month, I thought it would be fun to make it more fun this year. So I made myself an advent calendar for Valentine's Day. Each of the first 14 days of the month are represented here by either a little heart pocket into which you can tuck little toys or candies. I've got stickers in mine. And then of course, everything culminates on the 14th, which is this lovely big envelope down here in the bottom corner, into which you can put whatever. Maybe it's the gift card for dinner that night, or tickets to a movie, or maybe a little self-care and you've got a little certificate for the local nail salon perhaps. Maybe you're going out with a girlfriend. You know what I'm talking about. It's a little something for you. And it makes the whole month a little more fun. It adds color to an otherwise boringly bland wintry month, and it adds a little sweetness too. I like this. I love countdown calendars. I think they're so much fun. This just made Valentine's Day so much more fun for me. So it's the same canvas as January. It's just one color. I used blue. I'll explain that in today's tutorial. Link to the January canvas tutorial is in the description box down below. Each of these little hearts are the first 2 rows of our heart coaster tutorial. So no need to add the border to it, just the first 2 rows. Link also in description. I'll explain it in today's video. I'm even going to show you how I made these cute little chocolate numbered buttons using felt and embroidery floss today. It's going to be a different little tutorial, so if you want to make those, super easy and fun. And of course, we just made this envelope on a live stream recently, and we have a tutorial for that too. So all the components you need to make your very own countdown to Valentine's Day calendar are available in the description box, and I'm going to talk you through how to make everything and assemble it. If you're still working on January, or you're not sure you want to make a calendar, I've got more photos for other people's February unblankets that have already come into the Etsy shop. We'll be sharing them in the posts part of our YouTube channel a little later on this weekend. So if you're looking for a little more February inspiration, we've got loads of it for you. And if you are a Silk or Vicuña family member of the channel, we've got a brand new applique pattern for you available on the members page. And if you want a snowy owl applique and you're not a member of the channel, but you want to support us, you'll find this in our Etsy shop, link in description, and you can add a little snowy owl to your January unblanket canvas or your February unblanket canvas. Plus, I mean, he's an owl. He doesn't have to be snowy necessarily. Owls come in lots of fun different colors. That's a fun and easy little applique pattern. It's available now in our Etsy shop. And a big thank you to the family members who voted for a snowy owl pattern. Okay, there's a whole lot going on in today's tutorial, so let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we will stitch ourselves up a February unblanket countdown to Valentine's Day calendar together. Before I assemble the little advent calendar or the countdown calendar I made for myself for February, I want to talk a little bit about what goes into it, and I've got a couple of little miniature tutorials before I get to the actual assembly. So first and foremost, we've got the canvas. I will link you to the January canvas build, that tutorial, in order to give you the full in-depth version of how to make one of these, but it's exactly the same build as the January canvas. It is 36 stitches by 24 rows, and it's that double crochet border I put all the way around it. And I did do the unblanket version of the 2 double crochet, chain 1, skip 1 all the way across the top so that I can weave a little doweling rod through there so I can hang it. But if you're making this for an actual blanket, just solid double crochet all the way across the top. In total, I used about 130 yards for the canvas. So that's about 110-ish for the main canvas and about 20 or so for the border. All that again is explained in the January tutorial, which we'll link in the description box down below. I wanted something that wouldn't interfere with all the bright Valentine's Day colors, so I had a lot of this sort of denim-y gray blue acrylic yarn in my stash, and I decided that would be the perfect backdrop. And I love this lipstick red border that I gave around the edge of it. So again, 36 stitches by 24 rows plus the border. a size 4 medium weight acrylic yarn. I used my 5.5mm hook for it, also known as an I or 9, and of course my scissors and my yarn needle. That was the canvas. Then we made another one of these cute little envelopes on the live stream there last Monday. We'll link to the original tutorial for this down below. So if you want to add a little envelope to your unblanket, you're more than welcome to do that. This little envelope, of course, will contain the gift card for the outing on Valentine's Day, or of course it could have anything you want in it. I love that. That's going to be sitting at the bottom. There's about 30 yards, again, size 4 medium weight acrylic yarn, but if you're doing the unblanket version, it can be really anything you want, and that comfortably fits a gift card or a certificate. You'll also need a button and a needle and thread if you're going to do the little envelope just to stitch on your button, but the rest of it is just your typical yarn. I also recommend using either the same size hook, but if it's too big, your tension's too big, then you can go down to a 7mm, also known as a 4.5 or size 7, 4.5mm. This is a good hook to use for the envelope. That's what I did. If your tension's too tight, you can use the same 5.5mm hook if you're comfortable with that. So that's the envelope. Then we've got a whole bunch of hearts. These are my little pockets that I'm going to be assembling or stitching onto the calendar. These are what are going to hold all of the little treats as we count down the days. These hearts are all identical. You'll need about 108 yards total, size 4 medium weight acrylic yarn again. About 108 yards total for all 13 of these hearts. There's 13 hearts here. I used the 5.5mm hook for this one as well. And basically these hearts are the first 2 rows of our heart coaster. We'll link to our heart coaster tutorial in the description box down below. It's basically the heart without the white border. So if you make the first 2 rows of the heart, the colored part, fasten off, weave in your tails. If you want to use a long tail left on the heart to stitch it down, leave a long tail like you would for an applique, 18 inches, what is that, about 45 centimeters or so for a tail. I'm going to be using a different yarn, however, to stitch these on. And then, because I didn't have any little beads or numbered beads, I thought that would kind of be fun to label them with. Mr. InStitches and I kind of put our heads together and decided it would be really neat to come up with little badges. So these are little felt badges. What I basically did was cut a strip of brown felt, I was thinking chocolate, cut them into squares. Then I rounded the squares into circles. I cut 13 of them. Then I grabbed some embroidery floss and my embroidery needle, and I embroidered the numbers 1 through 13 on each of those 13 little chocolate coins. Then I laid out all of my hearts in the appropriate order so that they would be in the right order as I added the numbers to them. I didn't want to accidentally stitch on a number in the wrong order. And I grabbed some more embroidery floss. I used a pink. I thought it would kind of look nice to use pink against the chocolate brown on all those pretty colored hearts. And I stitched each of those chocolate sort of coins into the middle of each heart. And that's how I made my pockets. So I made little coin-sized number badges for each of my little pockets so that when I have them all laid out, I'll know what day belongs to what day. And all 13 of them come sort of laid out on the rectangle, then finish off at the envelope. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so that's where I came up with all the little goodies. Those are the tutorials. If you need them, you want to follow along. Those are the tutorials and how to use them linked down below. And now we can just assemble the whole little project. Once you've got all of the little bits and pieces for your countdown calendar, you're going to need some more yarn just to stitch on your hearts and your envelope. Unless you left long tails on your hearts, you can do that too. I've just grabbed some yarn from the stash. I really am not too concerned about what color because I'm going to try and embroider or like attach them from behind so that you don't really see any stitching. That's the intent anyway today. And for that, I'm going to use my trusty yarn needle as well. So I'm going to start by laying all of my hearts out in the order that I have them sort of prepared. I want to make sure that I've got them all going in the correct numerical order. Numbers 1 through 13. There might be a little bit of overlapping, but that's perfectly all right because these are little pockets. And there's number 13 down at the bottom. So a little bit of sort of fiddling. I may or may not pin these into place. I definitely want 3 neat columns. And of course, I won't be stitching all the way around the heart. I'm only going to be stitching about 3/4 of the way around because I need to leave the top part open so that I've got a little pocket. But that is basically the layout. So all 13 little hearts and the envelope in the bottom corner. Because of its size, I'm going to sew down the envelope first. It's the biggest, it sits in the bottom corner, and it uses up the most space, so I want to make sure that it's on there securely in the place that I want it before I start stitching in all of my little hearts, which are much smaller and can kind of move around a little bit more. So I've cut myself a long piece of yarn, and I'm going to be sewing down the entire pocket, and I'm going to be sort of attempting to sew from behind. So I'll explain what I mean by that. So I'm going to anchor my yarn on the back of my envelope. So I'm going to sort of tie a knot on it to anchor the yarn. And I'm not too worried about that little tail. I suppose I could weave it in if I want to. You know what? Why not? In the interest of being tidy. There's my little knot. I'll just take that little tail and weave it in underneath a few stitches here, just so it doesn't get in the way or work its way out down the road. There we go. So that's more or less out of the way. Good. Now I can re-add my yarn needle and start stitching. So I got a long, so bottom edge aligned with the right where the border touches the main canvas. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach underneath basically and use the top facing loops. So I'm going to zoom in here so you can sort of see what I'm doing. I'm using the top facing loops, and I'm going to first pick up a top facing loop of the canvas, and then I'm going to use a loop on the back of my envelope. And I'm going to stitch this down without being too tight or too loose, because I don't want this to kind of flop forward. It is a heavier piece, so it is going to kind of put a little bit of weight on the bottom of my my canvas here, but I'll just have to make sure that there's something equally tasty sitting in this pocket so that it hangs evenly. And then I'm just going to reach underneath, grab another front-facing loop, and then another stitch. So I can get the whole thing here if I want. And I'm not going to be super, I'm not going to get like a ton of the, like I'm not making big stitches. I'm just getting, I don't know, a stitch from every row or so. The whole idea is just, I think I'm going to be a lot more concerned about getting every single stitch across the top because that's where the weight is going to be falling. But I'm really just sort of tacking it along the side here. And again, I want to keep making sure that it hasn't moved. I'm going to grab another front facing loop here. And I'm trying to get the loops that are of the stitches on the back of the envelope that are pretty much right beneath it, or right sort of directly atop of it. So it won't show through the back. If you don't care, you can stitch right all the way through if you want. But if by using the top facing loops of the canvas, I won't have any stitching showing through the back. So this will just look really neat and tidy. So I'm going to grab 2 loops here. And now I'm going to go all the way along the bottom. I'm going to pick up the front facing loops here, and I'm just going to see if I can do this all at once and go through loops that match it on the underside of the envelope. And then the next one, 1 or 2 loops, it's fine. I'll pause every so often, make sure that it hasn't moved on me, and then you can see that it will be attached. The stitching won't show through to the back, and it's not coming off. So I'm going to do that all the way around the edge, making sure that I don't accidentally stitch through the whole thing, because I want to be able to still get in to my little envelope, obviously, so that I can put little goodies in there. But I'm going to leave it closed, all buttoned up, so that it's in the correct envelope shape as I'm stitching, just so I make sure that I don't accidentally kind of stitch something and pull it out of alignment. So that's what I'm going to do all the way around for the envelope. All right, I have stitched all the way around the underside, nice and neat and tidy, all the way around. It is now firmly attached. All I want to do now is make a little knot, just like I would any other time I was attaching an applique. And I'm going to just do it on a loop on the back of the little envelope. So I make a loop, run my needle through it, and pull it nice and tightly. And then, just like every other thing, I'm going to weave the tail in underneath some of those stitches. On the underside of the envelope, I'll sort of skip over a little thing, just sort of like any other little weaving in project that we do. I'm not too worried about these tails wanting to come out, because these are, at this point, the stitches are nice and snug and tight because there's a lot riding on them. Careful not to snip your stitches when you snip your sewing yarn. I'll put that aside. And now my envelope is on nice and firm. It's right in the bottom corner. I can open it up now and sort of put stuff in it, and it's part of the actual, oh gosh, that's cute. It's part of the actual wall hanging now, and it's not going to shuffle around. So that's the big thing out of the way. Now I can start working on all of the little hearts. I think next I'm going to do number 13. I may end up working from the bottom up all the way through this, but I'm going to get number 13, heart number 13, stitched down first, because it does sit in its own little space, and I also feel that this will be the easiest way to sort of show you how I'm stitching down this little pocket. It's not so much an applique as it's acting as a pocket. I'm going to attach my sewing yarn to the back just like I did with the envelope. Now, I'm not terribly concerned about the fact that I'm using white yarn. I had thought that maybe I would stitch them down a bit like I did the little chocolate buttons that I made the little numbers on, because I thought that might look kind of cute and folky. I like that sort of external stitching look, but I also just really like the solid colors against the background. So I think I'm going to do pretty much what I did here, and I'm going to place my heart exactly where I want it, and I'm going to stitch along the bottom of the outside edge. So I'm going to find a loop, and I'm going to pick up the bottom of the heart right underneath the edge, and I'm just going to keep rolling it back and finding a top facing stitch or a loop on the actual canvas, and then the loop that sits directly underneath the edge. And I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm going to roll it back, grab a loop on the canvas, grab a loop just underneath the edge. So normally when we're sewing down an applique, we're using the edge stitch. We're going through the edge stitch, and I'm just going to zoom in again. So normally we're going right through the edge stitch. So this right through here, that's normally where you see me stitch things down. But because I want that edge to just sort of look like it's free floating, I'm sort of using the loops just underneath it. So these are the loops underneath, and then that white yarn doesn't even show through. So I think I like this because I want to just showcase the edge of the applique, and I'm only going to sew around from about here to the other side so that I've got a nice sort of open pocket, and that's what's going to give me the little place to put a little candy or a little bag of tea or an equally sweet little treat for my little countdown calendar. And I'm going to just make sure that I'm working through as close to the edge as I can get without putting any stitches in that sort of show off the white yarn. And I'm going to do that all the way around to the other edge of the heart, so I can leave the top pocket part open. All right, I attached my yarn on the back. I sewed all the way around underneath the edge. So if I peel it back, you can sort of see the stitching. But then when it's sitting forward, you can't see the stitching. But I still have this cute little pocket, and my heart is definitely firmly attached. So I'm all the way back to this side. I want to do the same thing. I want to make a little knot on the back. So I'm going to just make a knot over top of that loop. Nothing gigantic. Nice and snug. And I know that it won't be pulling anything out of alignment. And then I think I'm going to weave it in. I want to weave it in so that you can't see it. So let's see about using some of these inside stitches along the heart. So just sort of the back facing loops. And then I really don't want to do too many. You could probably use the front facing loops of the canvas too, if you wanted to. Like down here against the back there, but I'm really not too worried about anything coming undone because I did knot it. And this is not something that's going to go in the washing machine very often. So if you are making this as like a little quiet book or something, even if it's part of a blanket and you think that it's going to get washed rather frequently, then weave your tail in a little bit more underneath those stitches, or use the same colored yarn to attach your hearts. That way when you weave your tail in, absolutely nothing will show and you don't have to worry about it. But in my case, these are just little pockets. So that is now firmly attached, and you can't see any of that stitching from the front or the back. Very neat and tidy. All that remains now is to stitch down the remaining 12 hearts, and I think it does make sense to work from the bottom up. Because I have now established that that's where the envelope is and that's where heart number 13 is, I can now sort of make better decisions about how and where I'm going to stitch down my hearts. I know that there's sort of space is a bit of a premium here, so I'm going to be sort of squishing them in. Like I said, I used a 5.5mm hook to do these hearts. I have somewhat tight tension. If you were concerned about having them all fit in, then using the smaller hook, the 4.5mm, even a 4.25mm, a G6 hook, for the 2-row part of our heart coaster might be better. It'll just make them a little bit smaller. But I'm not too worried about just sort of squishing these guys in, even if like they kind of touch all the way across. I'm not too terribly worried about that. What I am concerned about is making sure that they all fit in to the entire canvas. I wanted the canvas mostly covered with the hearts, which is why I'm happy to stitch them down so that you can't see any of the stitching, because I just want the pretty colored hearts to do all of the talking for this little project. So I'm going to sew them down all exactly the same way that I did the envelope and heart number 13. I will anchor my sewing yarn to the back with a little granny knot, a double granny knot. I'm not, if I feel like the the little string needs to be woven in, I will weave it in. Otherwise, I might just sort of trim them. Again, this is not going to be something that I'm going to be throwing in the washing machine very often, so I'm treating it more like a craft project and a little less like an actual blanket project. I'm going to make sure that my edge is right up against where the border and the edge of the canvas is. And I'm going to use the rows on the canvas as a guide so that the tip of these 3 hearts will all touch the top of the same row. And that's a really helpful eyeballing technique. When you're stitching things down, you can, keep an eye on the row. If you feel you need to, you can add a little stitch marker or just sort of indicate that row to yourself so that you don't get lost. And then all of the bottoms of your hearts will all end up being sort of touching the same place, and that'll keep them in alignment. So yeah, I'm just going to work away at stitching down all of my little hearts now, all the way around. So I'm going to do that three quarters of the way around thing. So I'm going to start mainly here, all the way down to the bottom, all the way up to the side. I might kind of pucker them a little bit just to make them take up a little less room, and also that gives me a little bit more pocket. They kind of like sit out a little bit. Oh my gosh, that's cute. So I can fit maybe a fatter little treat in there. So yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I'm just going to sort of poke them out a little bit, kind of like this, so that when I'm stitching them down, I have more of a little pocket effect and they kind of pop out a little bit. Plus, I think that actually makes them look a little cuter. This is one of those things where you want to really take your time as you're stitching, make conscious effort to get the right stitch in the right place and constantly sort of just make sure that it hasn't moved around too much on you. It gets easier and faster with every single little stitch you add. And if you were unsure, this sort of makes you nervous, this sort of invisible from behind stitching, it's always okay to use the same colored yarn as the heart you're using and stitch it down any old way you please. Just remember, if you're making pockets, only go 3/4. Don't stitch across the top because you still need that little pocket. So you've got like this cute little pocket. Perfect little spot to put a little treat in. Okay, I'm going to work away at that. I'm going to stitch all the way around, or I should say the 3/4 of this this row of little hearts, so 12, 11, and 10. Then I'm going to move on to 9 through 7, and I'm just going to kind of continue my way from the bottom up, making sure that I leave myself enough room up here so that they're not forced to overlap the top of order. So if I have to, I'll sort of wedge the little tip of each heart right down into sort of the nook of the heart below it. So yeah, I'm going to get these 3 stitched down and I'll come back and we'll take a look at how that looks. I now have the full first row of hearts stitched on, and again, it's all sewn from underneath. If you peel off the sides, you can sort of see the stitching there, but you can't see it from the front. The pockets are fully accessible, so I've got plenty of room to put snacks in there, and the stitching does not show through to the back. So I am pretty pleased with how they all kind of squished in. There's lots of room for a little something to sort of sit inside that pocket, and I'm going to go ahead now and as a guide, sort of using these as a guide, I'm going to stitch down the remaining 9 hearts, little heart pockets, and I'm going to try and tuck them all down just so the bottom is sort of showing right in the little bottom, sort of like as the bottom of each tessellation, that's the word I'm looking for. The bottom of each heart will sit neatly in the top pocket part of the heart below it. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch down the remaining 9, and I'll see you when I'm done with that. All right, I have stitched down all 13 of my hearts plus my envelope. I think this is adorable. All of my little pockets are quite accessible, and when it's hanging, I'll be able to tuck a whole bunch of little treats into each pocket and functioning just like any other advent calendar on the day. So the first, the second, the third, etc., etc. You just sort of take out the little treat that's sitting in the pocket, and it leads you all the way up to Valentine's Day. And in here, I think would be a nice place to keep a gift card for the restaurant you're going to, or perhaps the certificate, or a little sort of gift certificate that maybe you're going to go to the spa or get your nails done or something. I just think this is such a cute idea. And I just love the little hearts all over it. It looks like little jelly beans with little chocolate coins stitched into the middle of them. I'm kind of in love with it. I love how it turned out. I love those bright candy colored hearts against that soft denimish blue background. I love that there's a big envelope here for a little treat inside it. I've already hung it on the wall a couple times and it hangs quite nicely. It doesn't sort of hang one side or the other. And typically the thing I would put in here would be pretty light anyway. It'd be like a little gift card or something. So it hangs evenly. Oh, and by the way, I know you've probably noticed it's hanging on a knitting needle. I haven't settled on a knitting needle, although I do like the way that looks. And since this is primarily going to be something that decorates my craft room, I think having it on a long knitting needle would be kind of neat. I will be switching out the unblanket that hangs on my wall every month. So I haven't quite settled on a rod or a doweling, but a really long knitting needle is kind of cute. So I don't know, I'm kind of leaning towards that. We'll see where it goes. Still not sure yet. I'm much more having fun with making all these canvases so far. And that is the February one. I turned it into a countdown calendar because why not? Let's have more fun in February. I hope you enjoyed making that along with us this week. And if you've got pictures of your very own February unblanket countdown calendars, or perhaps they're a nice snowy scene, or whatever February might mean to you, please feel free to share the photos with us at our Etsy shop. Link is in description. You just pop over there, click on message seller, and you can attach a photo, and we will be happy to share it on the post tab of our website right here on YouTube. And there's a link to the community. It used to be called community, now it's called posts, but there's a link to it in the description box down there below as well, in case you haven't had a chance to check out everybody's January photos yet. Have a wonderful week. We will see you soon here on the Jayda InStitches Show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, stay cozy, make yourself a pixie hood. Also, link in description. We'll see you real soon. Bye, guys.
Hi everybody, Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.